Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome this afternoon's guest moderator, Eric Cohn from IndieWire, and today's guests, Destin Cretton, Brie Larson, John Gallagher Jr., and Keith Stanfield.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hello.
Doing great.
Hi everyone. So, when you watch a trailer like this, it gives you some idea of the fact that this is a very emotional movie. I saw it and can confirm that that is in fact an accurate representation. But one thing I would say is that on paper, you don't necessarily get that same indication. You know, the idea of a bunch of drama taking place in a foster care home is, one, not the easiest pitch, and two, doesn't really tell you that much at all. So what was your way into this story as a director?
My way into the story was very, very easy because I worked at a place like this, and I think the tone that we were going after in making this movie was a tone that was very similar to my own personal experience working in this environment, and also the tone of the stories that I heard from interviews that I conducted with other people who have worked in places like this, and that tone is surprisingly extremely entertaining. The stories that I heard from people are always so full of humor and full of moments that make you want to cry, moments that make you really pissed off, but it kind of bounces back and forth through all of that. So that was kind of the way into the movie.
But in terms of, you know, actual research, I mean, what you're describing could just as easily have been a documentary. So, you know, when you're talking about telling an actual story with specific characters, I mean, tell us a little bit more about your background working in places like this and how you drew from that to create these fictional characters.
Yeah, my first job out of college was working at a place like this for 2 years, and I left that experience with just a lot of questions and a lot of things that I had never thought about. What kind of parent am I going to be? What residue is left on me from my own parents? And those thoughts were just kind of brewing in my head for 4 years until I tried to organize them and fit them into a screenplay, which started out as a short and then ended up as a feature. And yeah, I mean, every character, there's a piece of myself in every character in the movie. The kids and the adults and the things that they're dealing with are thoughts and emotions that are really close to me. So I guess that's sort of.
Keith, we're going to get to you in a moment, but for Brie and John, your characters are really interesting in the film because you've gone through this program, that you've lived in one of these homes before as troubled teens, and now you've sort of, your characters have changed their lives and have started helping others. So it's one thing to understand from a director's point of view how a place like this would work, how the characters would exist in that environment. But one of the things that's really remarkable about the movie is how convincing it is, that it really does seem like you guys live in that environment. So was there an element of research on your own parts in terms of how you approached who these people were?
We were very fortunate in that it was arranged by the producers of the film that Brie and I got to go on different days and shadow different line staffers at a facility much like the one that's portrayed in the film. And I spent about 6 or 7 hours following a guy that does this for a living and has done it for a really long time. And it was really remarkably informative to be able to just get a chance to see him and how kind of casual it all is. It's remarkable work that they're doing, but you wouldn't know it watching him. It was like it's in his DNA. He's just been doing it for a really long time. And yeah, one of the things that he told me was that that really stuck with me was he was really good at making the kids laugh, and he seemed to be kind of a favorite. Whenever there was a question that needed to be asked or permission to go play this game or go do this from one of the kids, they all wanted to come up to him. And it felt like he was this kind of perfect. He was a disciplinarian because I saw him definitely lay down the law plenty of times that day, but I also saw him kind of deflect a lot. And that was something that I brought into the character of Mason that was already there in the script, is that he's such a natural caretaker, and he just is really good at kind of gaining the trust by humor and, kind of disarming in that way, but will lay down the law if it needs to happen. And he just told me to keep it light. He was like, keep it light, keep these kids on a schedule, but you can't imagine the darkness that's going on inside their heads at any given moment, so just try and keep it light, one of the most important things. And I think that's something that lends to the realistic tone of the film that you were talking about.
Brie, what was your way into this character? Did you go through a similar research process, talking to people like that?
Yeah, it was a similar thing, except I followed a woman who had been in the field for, I want to say 23 years. If not, it's longer than that. And it was incredibly informative, not just for this character that I was playing, but it's something that I've really struck me as a huge life lesson that I've continued and want to continue incorporating in my life, which is letting go. The second you walk on the floor with these kids, you realize that you're kind of navigating through treacherous waters, and you're trying to veer them in a direction while being firm and loving at the same time, and you're playing many different roles for them that they have never experienced and don't know how to accept. And so I felt a wave of kind of vulnerability. You feel almost like you're going to get eaten alive at first, because these kids are in a lot of ways smarter than me. And so I very quickly said, how do you do this? I mean, I feel exhausted already. What makes you do this not just for a day, and then you come back the next day, and then the next week, and then the next year, and then you do it for most of your life? What is it? And she said that you do the best you can, you fight, and you're there for those kids, and then you go home and you have to save something for yourself, and if you don't, then you crack. And that's kind of, in a way, what you start to see in the film is someone who isn't able to get back in touch with herself, and so she keeps putting it back into the kids, and then it's just this reflection of all of the things that she isn't comfortable dealing with. So that became part of the process of the film, of really becoming so committed and interested in those 12 hours every day where we were shooting, and was getting myself in this headspace of this slow unravel, and then throwing myself into a situation where I was trying to finagle their situation along with my own internal world. And then when I personally, Brie, would go home, I wouldn't think about it anymore. I wanted to sometimes. It was about 10 days into shooting where I went, I just screwed this whole thing up, and I wanted to. But then remembering that woman's strength, and it really helped me to keep a good head on my shoulders. And the other stuff, I mean, I think that the some of the most interesting and rich parts, and the things that I'm so still, I find mysterious and interesting about Grace is her internal world. And you get the rare opportunity in film. I got to play somebody who's trying to piece something together and solve something that's unsolvable, but I got to create what that was, and I feel still excited that I know what that is, and it's something different for other people when they watch it, and I love that. Every time I've played a character, I've always been interested in what their secret is and what it is that they're trying to get out of every scene, but it's never something that is said or is put expositionally, and I got to explore that much deeper with this.
Right, you do all this work behind the scenes, and then you don't have to explain that to people when they see the character that just sort of registers in these small conversations. And
but this was
asides.
part of it. I mean, that ended up with this film being like, I felt like a big piece of the pie for her is the fact that the audience, or in the audience is the kids as well, are starting to clock that something is happening, but not really sure what that something is.
Well, Keith, for you, your way into this project was very different, as I understand it, than from what these guys went through. So can you sketch out a little bit of that history of how you found out about it?
One day I checked my email, and I had an email from Destin. He was like, yo, we're doing a movie. And I was like, hell yeah, I'm down. So came down and no, we did a short version of it first, and the short film was successful, won in Sundance, and then like 5 years later, he just emailed me like, we're doing a full-length version, and we'd like you to come audition for it. So I came down there, danced a little bit, said fuck a little bit, and he was like, we want you. And I was like, I want you. And it's been love ever since.
His audition was actually the most sincere, authentic portrayal of that character, and that we had seen, and that email that he saw was actually, he responded to me 3 weeks late. I think by the time he saw it, there was 5 emails stacked up, because I was like, please answer, because we were auditioning other people for the part, and just hoping that he could come in, but finally when he responded and came and auditioned, I was in tears by the end of his audition in my living room. So it wasn't so much just him dancing around and saying cuss words.
There's certainly, it's another case where there's more going on under the surface than maybe we could see. But one thing I think it's important to point out is that your character is different from these guys in the sense that they have some distance from the more traumatic experiences in their life while you're really in the thick of it. So how did you sort of familiarize yourself with somebody who's just, clearly a brilliant mind, which is sort of the paradox of the movie, and at the same time really held back by all these other environmental factors?
Well, I think the fact that he's so young and immature sort of makes it difficult to develop and deal with his emotions in the way that the older staff members can. And also they've been through training and different things like that. He's basically just a raw kid off the street with no guidance. The only 2 people he looked up to for guidance sent him deeper into the hole of never-ending horse shit, basically. So growing up with that environment made it difficult for him to move forward. But actually, he's very similar to the other characters, because they're all trying to overcome an internal struggle and trying to evolve and get to the next plateau in various ways. So they actually have a weird kind of spiritual link, because they're all going through the same journey. It's just by different routes and in different times and space.
Destin, as a screenwriter, what's the specific kind of challenge in terms of writing these characters? I mean, they're so different in terms of not only their age groups, but also the kinds of hang-ups that they have. Each individual person seems to have a different kind of problem with a relative at home who did something to them, or anger management issues, things along those lines. It's like they fall into different categories. So you said that you kind of relate to all of them on a certain level, but you can't be all those people. So where do you go when you're getting into their headspaces?
I mean, most of the characters in this movie and the small storylines that are scattered throughout the film are taken and inspired by real things that have happened, or stories that I heard through these interviews, or their characters are combinations of a couple of real kids that either I worked with or had heard stories about. And so at the beginning of the writing process, I had just collected all these stories that had emotionally impacted me, and it was, a lot of it was just puzzle piecing together and finding common threads as to how they could all work together to ultimately affect Grace. I mean, every scene in the movie and every character in the movie, their own struggles, and they do have their own struggles and their own storylines that are happening, but more importantly, every scene is doing something to Grace, and it's either making her feel like she can do this or making her feel like she can't, and so that was kind of the through line for everything.
It's a lot of pressure to take on from the outset. You talked a little bit about how you found sort of the inspiration for this character, but there's another dimension to this movie which we haven't discussed yet, which is that it's also kind of a love story. So when you take that out of the context of what this movie's about, how do you think through the sort of challenges of being in the kind of relationship depicted in this movie, without actually being in that relationship, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, when you're depicting a relationship of, I think we had discussed, at least a couple years, 4 years or something, that Grace and Mason have been together, it has a certain lived-in feeling that is hard to get if you meet someone a couple days before you start shooting. There's the easy part, which is that I think I had been in a long-term relationship. John, you've been in a long-term relationship.
Definitely
Yep.
couple.
Okay, and so you kind of have an idea of what that feels like, and then the two of us went to dinner a couple days before we started shooting, and Destin did a very sneaky thing and put an envelope on John's doorstep that had conversation starters. It was very sweet. And so we went to dinner, and instead of there being any sort of awkward pause or this sort of like, so we've got to know each other, it was filled with talking and all towards this building this relationship. There were questions about what our hopes and fears were for being parents, to certain things that had happened to us as children. What do we think that Grace and Mason's first date was like? We even started calculating our income and figuring out, at what point would it have made sense for us to move in together financially? It was probably the reason why before anything else. And how much spare time we had and what we did with the spare time. And by the time, a 2-hour dinner was over, we had created an entire mythology and also learned how to communicate. So we had this back catalog of information that we both had agreed upon and kind of knew about. And then, if you want to get into kind of the bigger thing of it, I think that Grace and most of these characters, if not all of them, which I think is just the human condition, is the feeling of feeling unworthy for love and questioning at times whether you are allowed to be happy and whether that the rug is going to get pulled out. And whether you've actually had the rug pulled out or not, it creates another dimension to it. But Grace in particular, I think, has a hard time accepting and connecting that she's a lovable person and is actively kind of trying to backpedal and put more walls up so that that's harder and harder for him to do. And he's constantly like taking those little Legos down and trying to show that there is like a beauty inside of her that she's not worthy of, that she's not ready to sort of go towards and recognize, which I can of course relate to.
Sure. Keith, did you get an envelope with some starter questions?
For Liza Green?
I got a rap sent to me. He wrote an original rap. Oh, dang, they haven't even seen it. Yeah, there's no rap.
It's hard to talk. I forgot these haven't seen the movie.
We may ask for
Nothing's happened in the movie.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
Just.
But no, I didn't really have much to work on but a beautifully written script. Like, he wrote so awesomely that there wasn't much, there wasn't really much I had to do. The character was pretty much laid out, right there for me, because he's such an awesome writer. So that's that.
This is a very sentimental conversation. It's kind of like the movie. It gives you a good indication. We're going to take a look at a clip in just a second, but let's have you explain this device. It sounds to me like if this filmmaking thing didn't work out, you could start a dating service. But, you're very clearly motivated by the precision of creating characters. So why was it so important for you that these people had to basically go on a date and create these characters before they could play them for you?
For me, I hoped that it was going to work. I didn't know. It was more something out of necessity because we didn't have a lot of time for rehearsal and things. So with the day and a half that we had with everybody, I sent them on that date, hoping that those questions would just get them thinking about the themes that are in the movie. And then we did the same thing when we got everybody together, which was just for 4 hours. We had all the kids and the staff members together, and rather than trying to rehearse through scenes, we just tried to build relationships. So by the time we got on set, everybody was just comfortable with each other, and I think that was the most important thing for me, because that's a very hard thing to create as a director. It's really hard to just manipulate things to create what seems to be a bubbling family environment. And so thank goodness that everyone really got along, and they were game for like just playing games together and being silly and cracking jokes and building real relationships that then made it onto the screens, which is, so I'm just feel very lucky about that.
But I mean, to add to it and to give you credit is that you also have to pick the right players, and that I think started with it even before. It's like you have, I think great people find other like-minded, great, interesting people, and so we were all game and open, and nobody was like creepy or annoying, and so we were all really excited and stoked to hang out. I love these people. I'm so excited that we get to spend even just this time now together. It's great.
John started laughing like, oh, he thought he was the creepy, annoying one.
I was like, I had a different experience. No, it's absolutely true. It really felt from day one that everybody was on the same page. It really felt like we had all read this script, and it had resonated in a way where we recognized almost immediately what Destin had laid out, and what the way to approach it. It felt like everybody had the same idea.
And I think it's like actually a breakthrough moment in everyone's lives in different ways. Like it's a lot of firsts for everyone, so we were all going through a developmental journey in one sense or another, so we just held each other's hand through it, and that's what we got to do as people.
Oh, we're not
I'm
done
about to
yet.
preach, damn it.
We'll save it for the big finale. We have an uncensored clip. Do you want to set up what's going on here just very briefly?
Yeah, this clip represents, I think, fairly accurately how I felt on my first day working at a place like this. And that's it.
All right, let's take a look. Tense stuff. So we got a little sampling of all of you guys there to varying degrees. Tell us a little bit about getting angry on camera like that. The two of you especially.
The fuck is that supposed to mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, to me, it has to come from a real place. If it doesn't feel real, doesn't feel right, it's hard to. For me, I can't do it if it doesn't feel right. And we've all felt angry and mad at some point for some reason. We've all felt neglect. We've all felt that struggle on one level or another. So, I mean, I don't know. I think it's just you have to get into that place where you're actually feeling whatever you're supposed to be feeling. It's like feel how you really feel at this particular time in this particular space, and that's what we try to do.
Do you feel similar, Brie? I mean, you're also in this movie called The Spectacular Now that's coming out later this summer, which is a very different kind of experience, a kind of teen experience, which is, kind of slightly earlier on this timetable. But in terms of, showing rage on camera, do you have sort of like a certain number of pointers that you go through, and, so that you can do multiple takes, or?
No, I think maybe many years ago, or I don't know, maybe even the movie before I did Short Term 12, I think I had a really hard time differentiating between fiction and reality. And so in order for me to get to a certain place of upset, I was pretty good at torturing myself, really good at bringing up past things and knowing what those triggers were for myself. And I thought in some sort of sick way that I was like giving myself therapy, and trying to fix or rework out something in my head through this other alternate reality. And perhaps if I was able to have that release, it would make me feel better. But it really doesn't. It feels awful. And like I was saying about the letting go thing, it became really important for me that I can honestly say when I look on the screen, and I think that's why I can actually watch this movie, is I'm not watching myself upset about anything else other than I felt like I was Grace in the scenes doing it. The times when you see it in the trailer, when you see me getting really, into something, felt like I was fighting for those kids, and therefore I was fighting for myself. I was fighting for rights and survival, and that felt real and honest to me. And somehow, and I don't know if it's just having unlimited amounts of cups of coffee nearby, but you get in a certain zone and you can go for a while. You can't do it the same every time, but you go into that way. That's part of being an artist in any field, is you release yourself, just like Keith is saying. You release yourself to the process, and you say, today at this Tuesday at 2:00, this is what I'm able to give, this is how I'm feeling, and this is what's honest, and therefore it's right. I mean, that's the most right that I can think of right now. But if we shot this on a Thursday at 5:00 with X, Y, and Z scenes before it and X, Y, and Z scenes after it, and it could be different.
Right.
But it is what it is. I mean, it'd be interesting. It's interesting to me to think, what would the movie be if it was shot in a different order, but I love it the way it is.
Right. So we're going to go to questions in just a second, but very quickly, this movie showed up at the South by Southwest Film Festival kind of out of left field and went on to win the Grand Jury Prize, get distribution and so forth, critically acclaimed, all that stuff. What did that do to your headspace? I mean, are you ready to go Hollywood? Have you totally sold out, or do you still want to be a peer? I'm setting you up here.
I love it.
What's it like to go through that experience? Not a lot of people have that sort of opportunity to kind of just arrive out of nowhere like that. Completely out of nowhere.
I also feel very lucky for this group and my other friends who helped make this movie, because I don't think any of us would ever let anything get to our heads, which is I'm thankful for a community that encourages that and would probably kick me in the nuts if I did start letting things get to my head. So I'm extreme.
Speak for yourself, because I'm going Hollywood. Where's the jet at? I want a carpet laid out before we leave this motherfucker. No, he's right. We're all real humble human beings,
I think we're all just extremely thankful. I am so happy that people are connecting with the movie, and a movie that's so personal to me, and a story that means so much to me. It feels, it just feels wonderful that people are connecting with it, and regardless of what happens from here on out, I'm a very happy, fulfilled person, I think.
And just to clarify, you didn't come completely out of nowhere. You made one other movie called I Am Not a Hipster that played at Sundance and is available. People should check it out. I hear it's really good. We have time for some questions. Anybody who asks a question also gets a free copy of the soundtrack to Short Term 12, which is apparently really great. So that's an added incentive. So just
that's where the
raise
rap
your hand.
is.
For you, Brie, you've got 3 films now coming out with also Don John. And, there's a long process where these independent films take to get done and there. And is it weird to just suddenly see yourself out there in 3 different movies all at the same time? I mean, separate from your red carpet and your jets and all that. To see these things and then to finally see them completed, and how do you feel when you get to see yourself?
And that's Don John's Addiction, Joseph Gordon-Levitt's directorial debut.
Oh, no, it's just called Don John now.
Okay.
Addiction is long gone. It's old news.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt, whatever. Ignore me.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like I cry in the bathroom a lot right now because I'm really relieved, because I feel like I've been doing this for a long time, and you just don't always get the signs or the pat on the back that's you want, and it's just how it is. I even went to film school, and I thought I wrote a really great paper on the hours, and I got a D next to the person who got an A+ for their paper on a walk to remember. And I just felt a little bit of injustice there that I still think I'm working through. I don't really know. I feel like that's something that I've been asked multiple times or many times, and I don't think that I'm far enough or through all of this yet for me to have any sort of perspective on it, other than I feel really grateful and really excited and happy, and I look forward to whatever comes next. It's allowed me a little bit more wiggle room to choose what I want to do next, which is so incredibly important to me. And so I just feel excited about the scripts and the opportunities that somehow come about when all of a sudden somebody comes on the map. Then people are like, oh, I have this thing. That it takes the right person and the right people sometimes to bring a project to the surface again. So that's it. I don't really, I'm getting all itchy and nervous talking about this stuff. I don't Google myself or read. I haven't read anything. I read one thing actually, because 3 people emailed it to me, the Variety thing, which I shouldn't have read it. But I learned my lesson that I read one thing and I was like, it just doesn't work for me. I'm better in my ignorance. I'm better, I'll just eat cheeseburgers and go to the next Q&A and just kind of keep it at that level for now.
I remember on the first day when we came together before we even started shooting anything, and we all got to meet, and everyone was there, all the kids and the other people that play line staffers, and we just got to talk and share experiences and play some games with each other and do some improvising, and we got to learn a lot about what the dynamic would actually be at a facility like this. Even before we started filming, I remember that day thinking, this is already, I can tell this is a really incredible, special group of people that are clearly very fearlessly already committed, and the cameras aren't even rolling. Everybody was just there to kind of learn and soak things up. And then I remember at the end of the day, we were at this house. We did this all at this house that the producers were renting, and I had watched a couple people come in the front door, and the door would get stuck. It had a little trick to it. You had to kind of push it in and then lift up the handle and then pull it out. And I had clocked that early on. I'd seen people doing that. And then I remember Brie and I stayed to talk a little while longer with the producers and everybody. And we went to leave at the same time. And Brie got stuck on the door and couldn't do it. And I was like, hey, check this out. Goes like this. And I opened the door. And it was one of those moments all the producers laughed. And they were like, it's Grayson Mason, And it was just one of those moments where it was like the you could just kind of start to feel there's not that I'm saying because I know how to open a door, it was going to be a magical experience, but just that's one example of all these things that were happening on this day that started to feel kind of I think we're all here for a reason, and this is going to be special, and it was.
Where was your location? What city or state?
It was in California, outside of LA.
And how big was the crew?
It was fairly small. I don't
more than would fit in an RV, but less than what would fit on a celebrity tour bus.
Sounds pretty good.
Very
good analogy.
Specific description.
Okay, so you spend all this time. This is more for Destin, but I guess it's for all of you. You spend all this time writing, directing it, engulfing yourself in this project, and then it's done. What happens now? What do you feel?
You guys, this is the most awesome part about it is just everyone connecting with it. And I had an old lady come up to me. She was a million, and she was like, I love the rap scene. I was just like, oh shit, this is so cool. Yeah, man, it just brings us all together in different ways, and we realize that there are certain things like struggle that we all experience, and it doesn't matter where you come from. That's what I like about it the most. The people, love the people.
I agree.
Hello, John.
Hey, how are you? Good to see you again.
Now that you're having a very successful career in film and television, I was wondering whether you had any long-range plans to do stage work again, and being a trained stage actor and giving such fine performances on the stage, how do you balance television and film compared to the stage, and which is your favorite?
I don't have a particular favorite. I mean, there's nothing like doing a play. There's nothing like being on stage. Theater is just, it's kind of a transcendent experience, being able to go out on stage 8 times a week and do a play and commune with people and have a live audience. There's nothing like it. But it's been a great experience the last couple of years being able to do more film and television. This is probably the best time I've ever had on a set and being on camera. This was hands down the best experience that I've been blessed with thus far doing it. But yeah, it's weird. You have to start looking at your year in a different way and start making sure that you're picking the right things and that you're doing things at the right time. And doing a TV series takes about 6 months out of your year where you're booked solid and you can't do other things. So I don't know when I'll do another play, but I can't wait. I really am anxious to get back on stage someday. I'll do the Short-Term 12 musical.
We've been writing it.
We're working on it.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Just listening to you guys, I want to just find out, how did you get into this career? Like, everyone has a mentor, somebody in your life that maybe influenced you to become an actor, and you guys are also eloquent. I just was curious kind of a little bit about who was your mentor that got you into acting, or maybe writing, got you into this field.
Yeah, just go down the line. Very quickly.
Yeah, you guys go.
I don't really know. I told my mother when I was 6 years old that I knew what my dharma was and I was supposed to be an actor, which was extremely confusing because my parents were chiropractors in Sacramento. And my mother's very creative, but she wanted to be a dancer, and her parents said, no, you have to go to medical school. And so she was very, very helpful and pushed me towards any creative venture that I wanted. And I don't know, it's just been that thing that I feel like I've been supposed to do for the whole time. And along the way, I've been lucky enough to work with the biggest turning point for me, if we want to talk about like the actual word mentor, was Toni Collette. I was... like my first like real job was I got to play her daughter for 3 seasons on a TV show on Showtime, and my first scene with her, my first day, we had a scene together, and it was a really intense, hard scene, and it just went so well, and she was so complimentary, and it was the first time that I felt like I had been sort of accepted into a community, and it was the first time I started to really feel comfortable identifying myself with that profession, and yeah, that's kind of what I got.
For me, it was like I thought that telling stories on screen was cool, and it was something that I wanted to do one day.
I wanted to be a Ghostbuster from watching Ghostbusters at an early age, and when my mom told me that wasn't an actual occupation, and then I started noticing the Ghostbusters in other movies. I watched Scrooge, and I was like, "What's Dr. Venkman doing playing this like millionaire mogul?" And then I found out that they were all actors, and I said, "Oh, okay, well, I guess I'll do that."
This question's for Destin. Just wondering, you said you had this position for 2 years after you graduated school and everything. Like, did you always want to be a filmmaker, or at what point did you decide to turn this into a story to tell all?
Great question. While I was working there, I wasn't thinking that any of this could or should be turned into a film. I was really just in survival mode and trying to make it through every day, and it wasn't until a few years later that it had settled enough into in my brain, and I was able to organize it into something. I actually didn't. I mean, this kind of is a combination with your question. I didn't have a mentor early on. I actually had a lot of people telling me no, telling me like that. I actually had a screenwriting teacher once ask me if I had other aspirations in life after he read the first thing that I had written. And a lot of it was I think a lot of those no's pushed me to a place where it forced me to ask myself why I really wanted to do this, and it had nothing to do with an occupation. It had nothing to do with trying to make money off of it. It had nothing to do with any kind of success like this. It was the process of making films was something that I was just in love with, and I wanted to continue doing it, and I would happily do it for the rest of my life and lose money on everything that I make. And so that's what I was doing for the first 10 years of making movies, was just working some kind of job, saving up my money, and doing a short film every summer, or doing a documentary, or anything that would allow me to enjoy this process with other people that I love working with. So.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Hi, I'm Steph, and I was wondering, the film industry is pretty tough, make ends meet, and try to make a living. And I was wondering, do you all work full time, or do you have a side job? How do you cope with that?
I've always had a side job, and for the past 5 years, I've been a teaching artist at a high school, and so I still do that. It's their film and video section, so I'm basically the nice uncle that gets to come into class and help them with their projects, and when they have like behavioral problems, I don't have to deal with them.
Yeah, you're right, man. It's very, very hard, and it's best to just be rich before you try to pursue acting. I work in a medical marijuana facility, so that's what I do. It's pretty cool because I can come and leave whenever I want. So I'm just lucky, I guess, with that. But yeah, you're definitely gonna need some kind of support or something. Out here starving.
I had my first professional job as an actor when I was 15, and I've luckily, every time the money's about to run out, in the past for me, I've always gotten like an off-Broadway play. I'm like, okay, great, $200 a week. Awesome, I really need that right now. And so I've been really, really fortunate in that I've only had to cater a few times, and it was a total nightmare, and I was awful. And I started at the bar, and then I couldn't even open a bottle of seltzer. It sprayed. It was like a comedy of errors. The seltzer sprayed everywhere, and then I broke a glass, and then I drank a bunch of free wine that they gave me, and then I was drunk, and I tried to clean it up, and I cut my hand, and so there's like, I really believe that there's little else that I'm capable of doing.
Very quickly before we wrap up here, the movie opens in late August, which is still sort of a ways away. But I was wondering if we might be able to give the audience here and the people listening to the podcast a little sample of something that is one of the major selling points. Keith, you keep sort of alluding to this rap scene. So you're very proud of the rap scene, which is also on the soundtrack. Is there any chance you could give us a little sample just to close us out?
You said a sample?
Just a little bit, or the whole thing. Up to you.
You might need a beat from Mason.
All right, let's do it. All right. Cool. It don't matter now. Damn near 18, all the pictures in my head is fucking faded. I'm always wishing for something amazing, but when your life is shit, then it ain't no trade-in. So put me on your books so you know what it's like to live a life not knowing what a normal life's like. Put a label on my head so you know what it's like to live a life not knowing what a normal life's like. Put me in the sky. Wait, what is it? Put me in us, you know what it's like.
Thanks so much, everybody. Perfect note to end on.